What's up, everybody, and welcome back to my channel. I was recently listening to Chris Lopez's podcast, Pressure Talks with Single Dads, because he just got back. He took a little bit of a hiatus from it, but he is now officially back on the scene. And something that might be a little bit interesting to you guys is that he revealed that he planned to buy his baby mama, Kailyn Lowry, a Mother's Day gift on behalf of their children. So I'm just going to recap it from the very beginning because, that's what I always do. So at the very top of the podcast, he explains why he took a break from, the show and social media in general. And he said that he felt as though he needed a little bit of a mental health break and that he was getting a lot of really negative comments on his posts and in his videos whenever he would go live. And he complained about social media being a really negative place and people telling him that his kid is not his, which to me was surprising, but at the same time, also not surprising. I was like, oh my God, guys, his kid is almost a year old at this point, and people are still accusing it, Creed, of not being Chris's kid because of his pale skin. And I don't know. I find that really, really crazy that it is still going on. The colorism behind there has not faded. I think it's been kind of said time and time again that, first of all, even if Chris was completely black, his kid did stand a chance of just being very pale because genetics work that way, right? But not, because Kail is white. But not only that, but, Chris is not fully black. He's 1/3 black, he's 1/3 Mexican, and he is also 1/3 white. So his son, Creed, being pale is not exactly the shock of the century, but I guess to some people it still is somehow, some way. He also talks about how he is not clout chasing. So this comes from a little bit of a social media storm spurred the other day when the Teen Mom 2 trailer dropped, and then we saw Chris in there with his face unblurred, and he went on his Instagram story and, he posted, I'm going to see what I could do about this with a judge emoji as if he was going to try to sue MTV or something like that. And people were like, listen, sir, you hardly have 2 nickels to rub together. So stop it. And then people were also saying, you spend all your time on social media, on Instagram, having these Instagram lives where you talk about Kail or you insinuate things about her and allow people to say things about her, your podcast, pretty much every episode. I listen to these episodes for you guys. I don't listen to every single one of them because it's tough, y'all. But, the episodes that I do listen to, they always reference Kail. I've never listened to an episode and, had it not reference Kail in some way, shape, or form. So I don't really understand why he doesn't get where people are coming from when they say that they're surprised that he's so anti being on the show, when he's so obsessed with talking about the show and the star of the show on social media, right? And we're actually going to get into him really, really going, over the edge with that a little bit later on in this recap. So when he was explaining why he was so upset about his face not being blurred from the trailer, he's saying that what he meant was that he wants to be paid for it. He doesn't want MTV to be sneaky with his image. He's like, I need more money than what you offered me the first or second time around. And, judging by the way he was mincing his words, he's saying, that the girls are paid hundreds of thousands of dollars and the network makes millions of dollars from the show. And he's not even being offered, the hundreds of thousands or whatever. So I'm like, okay, he's offered less than 100K and he seems to be wanting a 6-figure range. And he's saying at this point that he knows that he would be a huge ratings draw for the show. And so he deserves to make over 100K off the bat. And I wonder, is MTV on the third offer going to offer him 100K and he still doesn't want that because he feels as though himself will be a big enough draw to earn what the other girls earn for giving up so much of their lives over these years? To me, that would be a little bit delusional, although I do get what it is that he's saying. And I do agree that Chris appearing on the show and having scenes with Kail would be a huge revival for Teen Mom 2. And because of that, he should be paid a certain amount of money. But on the other hand, I'm also kind of like, well, listen, Chris, if you had agreed to do this show 4 years ago, especially while you were in a relationship with Kail, you would have been making those six figures that you're seeking by now already. Like, we already know that all of these girls, including Kail, have paid their dues and made, like the $60,000, $50,000 range. And they slowly work their way up to what they're making at this point. They didn't just sign up, like, hey, MTV, we're going to make you millions of dollars. We need X amount off the bat. They didn't do that, even though they were earning MTV millions of dollars, especially in the early days of the show. These things are, unfortunately, a process. And, remember when David was being sued, like his financial info was revealed, and it said that in his first season of the show he was making about 60 something thousand, and then the second season, right about when he was about to be fired, or when he was fired, sorry, he was like making 98,000 a year. He was supposed to, so it was like he was just right about there. Like, he was making that money. He had to pay his dues his first season, then he was making the money that you're seeking to make right off the bat. So although I see him, and he was a huge ratings boost for Janelle as well. Like, we were really tuning in with bated breath to see just how psychotic that guy was. So again, I see, and I do agree that Chris deserves to be paid a certain amount of money because him being on the show will bring in a lot more viewers. But at the same time, he would have already been, closer to what it is that he's seeking if he had already started shooting 4 years ago. And he also would have had room to negotiate as well if he had started shooting 4 years ago as well. So to use Devon from Teen Mom 2, Brianna De Jesus' baby daddy, he's not making the kind of money that the other dads on the show are making. And, in knowing that, he was able to negotiate like for a drastic pay rise while still maintaining his position on the show this season. In fact, Brianna didn't want him to film, but he continues to film because the show already has proof points for him to show that he deserves the scenes and to show that he deserves the money, to the point where Brianna can't dictate whether or not he films a show. She tried to sabotage him by not allowing him to see his daughter for weeks at a time. But guess what? We saw last night that he still got his own solo episode with his daughter. And we learned on social media as well from the horse's mouth that he managed to negotiate a raise. So, Chris, right now, as far as I'm aware, he doesn't really have income. Like, I know that he's trying to get into like woodsmithing or whatever it is, but does he have a solid client base for that? No, not right now. He's got his podcast, but does he have a solid advertiser base for that? No, not right now. I think I've only heard like a total of 2 ad reads on that podcast. And in the episode that I just listened to today that I'm recapping for you guys, there were no ad reads for it. So right now, as a father of 2 kids, I don't understand why he is not seeking this opportunity to just get on the show, get his foot in the door, and then negotiate for more money once he has proof points for how the ratings have increased since he joined the show, right? And, it comes down to it, like, when you work in the regular corporate world, when I was working in the regular corporate world, especially in marketing, you have proof points of how you're making companies millions of dollars, but you're not making the millions of dollars. You're not even making like the hundreds of thousands of dollars the way these girls are making, especially like, in the early era of your career. You just work your way up. That is just unfortunately the way it goes. So I don't understand why he would rather just stay living in his grandma's place when he's got 2 children to take care of than to do the show, make his money, get his own place, invest in things, and then just continue to grow his money. I really, truly, genuinely do not understand it, although I do see him wanting a solid amount of money. I personally assume that MTV offered him max like $80,000, which to me, I get it. Like, for reality television to really put yourself out there, for people to have opinions about you and everything, it's not the most, but come on, it's a starting point. And, the difference between making 80,000 and making 500,000 in reality TV is a lot smaller and like quicker to jump from point A to point B than it is for regular people in the corporate world, which is something that, is more likely for Chris if he continues to hold out. Because first of all, on Kail's podcast a couple of weeks ago, I don't know if it was Baby Mamas No Dramas or if it was Coffee Convos, But she talks about how she has not yet heard about Teen Mom 2 being renewed for another season. So this one that's being aired is the last one that they taped. And so as of the last time she mentioned seasons, they have not yet been offered another season. So to imagine that the ship has already sailed on him potentially without him ever like cashing in on it and being able to make the range that he'd been holding out for in the hopes of making initially is a little bit sad to me personally. I hope that that's not the case, but so far, based on what Kail has said on her podcast, the future of the show is a little bit in jeopardy here. Let's go on here. So by the way, he also says that another reason that he doesn't see it as worth it based on the amount of money that they're going to pay him is because the show portrays him and Kail as not getting along. But listen, like he only has his podcast to get that side of the story out. Right now on the show, Kail is getting to portray those sorts of images without him having a proper stage to issue a rebuttal. Like if he was getting his own scenes on the show, he'd be able to say that his damn self, right? He's like, listen, she just invited me to go kayaking with her this past weekend. And so if you guys follow Watermelon, I'm always hyping her up. She's got like a really good tea. She's got like an eagle, what do you call it? Like an eagle eye on them. She found that like this past weekend, Kail went kayaking with the guy that she's been kind of dating on and off for the past several years. So it seems as though, I don't know if that was like a low-key subliminal from Chris. I don't know, but she's saying, listen, Kail invited me to go kayaking this past weekend, but if you were paying close attention to Kail's stories, you'd see that she wound up actually going with another guy that she has kind of been dating on and off the past several years, in between her kind of situationship with Chris. So to me, it's kind of like Chris putting that out there to let that guy know, listen, you're the backup, boo-boo. People are seeking attention on social media. Again, I find that funny because he goes live literally like 10 times a day to say literally nothing. I had to kind of mute his account because he was going live so often and it was never anything of something. He would literally just sit there like not even sit there. He would lie down on his bed and just read people's comments like, yo, wow, that's crazy. And he also claims that he's been quite quiet, but about his relationship and everything. But again, that's not true. Every episode of this PTSD podcast, there is Kail's name either being outright dropped or situations about her being insinuated. Okay. Same thing about his social media, especially his Instagram. And then he says that his pet peeves in relationships or triggers in relationships include when people do things to him that they wouldn't want done back to them. And then he also hates when people who are obsessed with communication suck at it. Again, Kail has a degree in communications. Is that a subliminal at her? I don't know. Am I reaching? Maybe. You guys tell me in the comment section. And he also says that he thinks that toxicity, this is where things get really dark. He thinks that toxicity can be love because sometimes toxic relationships or toxicity in general is just people who love hard but don't know how to like show it. And then I'm kind of wondering, like, is that how he sees his relationship with Kail? He also claims that some of the best relationships are toxic. Wow, you guys, I guess that explains the multiple PSAs flying around between the two of them. And as the podcast wraps up, he claims that Black men get hated on for dating white women, but Black women get praised for dating white men. Not true at all. I don't know why Black men or, Black adjacent men love to say this. It is absolutely not true. Black women get heat as well for interracial dating. I don't know why anyone gets heat for this in 2021, but I digress. It still is an issue on both sides. And I assume with other races as well. I assume when Asian men or Asian women, quote unquote, date out, they catch heat from someone somewhere. Everybody does, unfortunately. And he also talks about getting Kail a Mother's Day gift on behalf of his kids. So I guess at this point, it really does seem as though things are on the up and up for him and Kail. And that's not surprising to me because remember, the last time I talked about them was a video that said, I think that they are kind of seeing each other again. And that was because Kail talked about how she and Joe Rivera, her first baby daddy, have started to fall out over the past couple of weeks, which just so happened to be when Kail started kind of hinting about things getting better with Chris. She talked about Chris being present for one of Lincoln's games, being around Javi as well, which I was like, well, why would he be there if they weren't seeing each other? Chris talked about how she invited him to go kayaking this past weekend. And then we find out that she invited another guy that she's been kind of dating to go kayaking this past weekend as well. all signs point to a possible love triangle or situationship between Kail, Chris, and that other guy that she has been dating as well on and off. Go check out Watermelon's Instagram for a little bit more intel on who that guy is, of course, you guys. But in the meantime, make sure to let me know what you think about this situation between Kail and Chris, them getting along, him wanting to be paid like, multiple six figures for his time on the show, like right off the bat, him thinking that he is a guaranteed ratings boost for Teen Mom 2's slumping ratings as well. Make sure to let me know all of that in the comment section down below. And as usual, we'll tag. That's all for now. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.